The sound of the slap echoed like a gunshot through the dead, silent ballroom. 300 hardened criminals held their breath, waiting for the blood to spray. Instead, the most ruthless mobster in the city wiped his jaw, tilted his head, and whispered a terrifying command. "Do it again." The air inside the subterranean private lounge of the Bellagio was thick with the scent of Cuban cigars, expensive Tom Ford cologne, and raw, unfiltered power. It was an invite-only event, an underground gathering of the West Coast's most dangerous families under the guise of a charity foundation dinner. Penelope Davies stood near the swinging doors of the kitchen, her dark eyes scanning the room with the meticulous precision of a seasoned general. As the head event coordinator for Luxe Catering, she was used to managing high-stress environments. She was also used to being the largest woman in the room. Unapologetically fat, Penelope carried her weight with a regal posture that demanded respect. She didn't shrink herself to make others comfortable, nor did she hide behind baggy clothes. Tonight, she wore a tailored, deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and commanded attention. At exactly 10 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. The quiet hum of conversation died down as the heavy mahogany doors swung open. Dominic Rossi had arrived. Dominic was the undisputed head of the Rossi syndicate. Tall, broad-shouldered, and possessing a face that was as brutally handsome as it was terrifying, he walked with a predatory grace. Men scrambled to clear a path. Women lowered their eyes. He was a man who traded in fear, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency was known from the docks of Seattle to the casinos of Las Vegas. Penelope watched him take his seat at the head table. She had a strict rule: serve the food, collect the check, and never look the monsters in the eye. But her rule was shattered when she heard a sharp, panicked gasp near the VIP section. She turned to see Tony Lombardi, one of Dominic's most volatile capos, gripping the wrist of Clara, one of Penelope's youngest waitresses. The girl was shaking, a tray of champagne flutes rattling dangerously in her free hand. "I said, pour it again, sweetheart," Tony slurred, his grip tightening until Clara whimpered. "And this time, don't spill a drop on my suit." Penelope didn't think. The maternal, protective fury that made her so formidable in the kitchen flared to life. She moved across the ballroom floor, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, parting the sea of dangerous men through sheer, unyielding momentum. "Let her go," Penelope said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs of the room like a serrated blade. Tony looked up, his eyes sweeping over Penelope's full figure with a sneer of pure disgust. "And who the hell are you? The kitchen ran out of food, so they sent the mascot." A few of the mobsters chuckled. Penelope's expression didn't change. She stepped directly into Tony's personal space, towering over him in her heels. "I am the woman running this floor. Release my staff, or you won't have a hand left to hold your glass." Before Tony could draw the weapon holstered beneath his jacket, a shadow fell over them. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was low, coated in gravel and authority. Dominic Rossi stood there, flanked by 2 towering bodyguards. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tony immediately dropped Clara's wrist, stammering, "No, boss. Just teaching the help some manners." "She's got a mouth on her." Dominic didn't look at Tony. His piercing grey eyes locked onto Penelope. He took in her flushed cheeks, her clenched fists, and the defiant set of her jaw. He stepped closer, deliberately invading her space, trying to force her to step back. Penelope planted her feet. "You're making a scene at my table," Dominic murmured, his voice dangerously soft. "Women like you should learn to keep their heads down. You take up enough space as it is. Don't make yourself a target." The blatant disrespect, the casual cruelty regarding her body, and the sheer arrogance of the man snapped the last thread of Penelope's patience. She didn't hesitate. Penelope raised her hand and struck Dominic Rossi across the face. Crack! The sound was deafening. The entire ballroom froze. Clara covered her mouth to muffle a scream. The two bodyguards instantly drew their firearms, aiming them directly at Penelope's chest. 100 other men in the room stood up, hands reaching for their holsters. Penelope's palm stung fiercely, but her heartbeat was steady. She stared directly into the eyes of a killer, refusing to flinch. Dominic slowly turned his head back to face her. A red mark was rapidly blooming across his sculpted jaw. He raised a hand, making a sharp, swift motion. Immediately, his bodyguards lowered their weapons. The room remained trapped in a suffocating silence. Dominic looked at Penelope, his eyes dark and unreadable. A slow, chilling smirk spread across his lips. He leaned in until his mouth was inches from her ear. "Do it again," he whispered. Penelope's breath hitched, but she held her ground. "I don't repeat myself for men who don't listen the first time." Dominic threw his head back and laughed, a rich, booming sound that sent a shockwave of confusion through the ranks of his men. He looked back at her, his eyes blazing with sudden, intense fascination. "Get your staff out of here," Dominic ordered, his tone suddenly businesslike. He looked at Tony. "And if you ever touch one of the civilian workers again, Tony, I'll take the hand myself." Penelope didn't wait for a second invitation. She grabbed Clara's arm and marched back toward the kitchen, feeling the heavy weight of Dominic Rossi's gaze burning into her back every step of the way. The drive home to her apartment in Henderson was a blur of adrenaline and cold terror. Penelope's hands shook so violently she could barely grip the steering wheel of her Honda. She had slapped a Mafia boss. Men had been buried in the Nevada desert for much less than a sideways glance at Dominic Rossi. She locked her doors, drew the blinds, and sat in the dark of her living room, waiting for the inevitable kick at the door. It didn't come that night, nor the next morning. It came 3 days later, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, in broad daylight. Penelope was walking out of a wholesale restaurant supply store when 2 black SUVs boxed her car in. 3 men in immaculate suits stepped out. The leader, a broad-chested man with a broken nose she recognized as one of Dominic's bodyguards, opened the back door of the SUV. "Miss Davies, Mr. Rossi would like a word." She knew better than to scream. She climbed into the back, her heart hammering against her ribs. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through the heavily guarded gates of a massive estate nestled in the canyons of Summerlin. She was escorted into a sprawling library that smelled of old paper and leather. Dominic Rossi was sitting behind a massive oak desk, staring at a laptop screen. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he commanded. Penelope remained standing. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. I'm not going to sit here and wait for you to monologue." Dominic finally looked up. That same infuriating smirk touched the corners of his mouth. "If I wanted you dead, Penelope, you would have never made it home from the Bellagio. Sit." Reluctantly, she lowered herself into the leather chair opposite him. "Do you know why I let you live?" he asked, leaning back and steepling his fingers. "Because you're a masochist," she shot back. Dominic chuckled. He tapped a key on his laptop and spun it around for her to see. It was security footage from the gala. It showed the moment Tony grabbed Clara and Penelope intervened. But Dominic pointed to something else. The tray of champagne glasses Clara had been holding. "Watch the bartender," Dominic said softly. In the corner of the frame, right before Clara picked up the tray, the bartender slipped a small vial from his sleeve and emptied a few drops of clear liquid into one specific glass. The glass that was positioned perfectly for the head of the table. For Dominic. "Aconite," Dominic explained quietly. "Wolfsbane. Fast-acting, almost impossible to trace in a tox screen unless you're looking for it. It causes immediate cardiac arrest." Penelope felt the blood drain from her face. "You..." You were the target. Yes, Dominic said. When Tony grabbed your waitress, he knocked that specific glass over. It shattered on the floor. I smelled the bitter almonds when I walked over to intervene. If you hadn't stopped him, if that tray had made it to my table. He paused, his gaze burning into hers. You saved my life, Penelope. Even if you did slap me immediately afterward, I didn't know, she whispered, the reality of the criminal underworld suddenly crashing down on her. I was just protecting Clara. I know, Dominic said. He closed the laptop with a snap. Which is exactly why you're here. There is a rat in my syndicate. Someone high up. Someone who knew my exact seating arrangement, who managed to bribe or replace a bartender at an event with the tightest security on the West Coast. Penelope frowned, her sharp mind already processing the information. Tony Lombardi. He made the scene. He knocked the glass over. It could have been a deliberate distraction, a way to dispose of the evidence once he realized the timing was off. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, a flash of genuine respect crossing his features. You have a dangerous mind for a caterer, Miss Davies. I manage events for 500 drunk, demanding clients a week, Mr. Rossi. I know how to spot a liar and a cheat. It's a job requirement. She crossed her arms, her ample chest rising as she took a deep breath. But what does this have to do with me? I saved you by accident. We're even. Let me go. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Dominic said, standing up and walking slowly around the desk. He leaned against the edge, towering over her. The bartender is dead. Found in an alley yesterday. Whoever orchestrated this is cleaning up their tracks. And right now, the only people I can trust are the ones who have absolutely no ties to my family. He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing the fabric of her sleeve. Penelope shivered, fighting the urge to pull away. I need eyes and ears in places my men can't go, Dominic said, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur. You cater to the elite of this city. Politicians, businessmen, and my rivals. You blend into the background. People ignore the help. They speak freely around you. Penelope stared at him, aghast. You want me to be your spy? Are you insane? I want you to be my partner, Dominic corrected, his grey eyes darkening. You are fearless, Penelope. You didn't flinch when my guns were drawn on you. You stood up to a man who could have broken you in half. I need that fire. And if I say no? Dominic leaned closer, the scent of his cologne enveloping her. Then you walk out that door, and we never speak again. But understand this. Whoever tried to kill me knows you caused the scene that ruined their plan. You might not be in my world, Penelope, but you're on their radar now. Penelope swallowed hard. She looked at the door, then back at the ruthless Mafia boss offering her a devil's bargain. She had spent her entire life being underestimated, told she was too big, too loud, too abrasive to fit into polite society. Now the most dangerous man in Nevada was telling her that her flaws were exactly what made her a weapon. What's the pay? She asked, her voice steady. Dominic Rossi smirked. Whatever you want, Penelope. Whatever you want. Over the next 6 weeks, Penelope Davies transformed from a high-end event coordinator into the most dangerous weapon in the Rossi Syndicate's arsenal. Her catering company, Lux Catering, was the premier choice for Las Vegas's elite, granting her unrestricted access to the boardrooms, private estates, and luxury hotel suites where the city's true power brokers operated. Society had taught Penelope that a fat woman was often treated as invisible. In the glittering, superficial world of the ultra-rich, she was viewed as the help, a fixture in the background to be ignored while billionaires and crime lords discussed their darkest secrets. Penelope took that societal prejudice and weaponized it. The trap was set at the Waldorf Astoria, Las Vegas, during a private, high-stakes baccarat tournament hosted on the 39th floor. The guest list was a who's who of the criminal underworld, including Vincent Moretti, the head of a rival faction that had been bleeding into Rossi territory. Penelope stood behind a sprawling, raw bar, carved entirely from ice, expertly shucking oysters and arranging them around beluga caviar. She wore her crisp black chef's coat, blending seamlessly into the opulent chaos. Behind her ear, hidden by her thick, dark curls, rested a micro-transmitter. Dominic Rossi was listening to everything she heard from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. "Keep your eyes on the private suite down the west corridor, Pen," Dominic's voice murmured in her ear, his deep baritone sending a familiar, involuntary shiver down her spine. Moretti just walked in, and he wasn't alone. I need to know who went in with him. Penelope wiped her hands on a linen towel, gesturing for her sous chef to take over the station. "I'm on it. Going to refresh the Dom Perignon." Loading a silver tray with 2 ice buckets of vintage champagne, she navigated the crowded room. She carried herself with the same imposing, unapologetic grace that had first caught Dominic's attention. She didn't squeeze past people with whispered apologies. She moved with purpose, forcing the dangerous men in the room to step aside. She reached the heavy oak doors of the West Suite. 2 armed guards stood outside, their eyes narrowing as she approached. "Private game?" the taller guard grunted, crossing his arms. Penelope didn't miss a beat. She hoisted the heavy silver tray, her expression hardening into the impatient glare of a woman who had a job to do. "Mr. Moretti specifically requested the '08 vintage. Unless you want to go in there and explain to him why his champagne is getting warm in the hallway, I suggest you open the door." The guards exchanged a hesitant look before the taller one stepped aside, opening the door just enough for her to slip through. The suite was bathed in dim, amber light. Vincent Moretti sat on a velvet sofa, a cigar clamped between his teeth. But it wasn't Moretti that made Penelope's blood run cold. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip, was Leo Rossi, Dominic's cousin, his most trusted underboss. Penelope kept her breathing steady, carefully setting the heavy silver tray down on the marble-wet bar. She kept her back to them, meticulously arranging the crystal flutes, allowing the silence in the room to stretch. "The aconite was a failure, Leo," Moretti rasped, pouring himself a drink. "You promised me Dominic would be in a body bag after the Bellagio gala. Instead, he's tearing the city apart looking for a rat." "It was a fluke," Leo snapped, turning away from the window. The resemblance to Dominic was there, but where Dominic's features were carved from granite, Leo's were sharp and nervous. Some fat bitch from the catering staff caused a scene, knocked over the glass. But the plan remains the same. The Rossi family belongs to me. Dominic is too traditional, too rigid. Once he's out of the picture, I'll sign over the docs to you, just like we agreed. "You'd better deliver," Moretti warned. "Because if Dominic finds out you're working with me, there won't be a piece of you left large enough to bury." Penelope's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Tony Lombardi had just been a distraction, a loud, obnoxious red herring. The real traitor was royal blood. "Did you get that?" Penelope breathed, barely moving her lips, praying the microphone picked it up. "Get out of there, Penelope! Now!" Dominic's voice crackled in her ear, completely stripped of its usual smooth composure. He sounded feral. "Walk out the door." Before she could move, the ice tongs slipped from the rim of the bucket, clattering loudly against the marble countertop. Both men stopped talking. "Hey!" Leo said sharply. He stepped towards the wet bar, his hand slipping inside his tailored suit jacket. "What are you doing over there?" Penelope turned around slowly. She didn't cower. She looked Leo dead in the eye, her posture straight. I am serving the champagne, sir. Just as requested. Leo's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, the polished Patek Philippe watch on his wrist catching the dim light. He recognized her. The realization dawned on his face like a slow, creeping shadow. You're the caterer from the Bellagio. The one who slapped Dominic. Moretti stood up, drawing his weapon. She heard us, Leo. Kill her! Penelope's mind raced, scanning the room for a weapon. The heavy champagne bottle, the ice pick. But before Leo could draw his gun, the heavy oak doors to the suite were kicked open with a force that splintered the wood. Dominic Rossi stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his usual immaculate suit. He was in a black tactical jacket, holding a suppressed Heckler & Koch MP5. He looked like the devil incarnate. Dominic, Leo started, his face draining of color. Touch her, Leo, Dominic interrupted, his voice a deadly, vibrating hum. He stepped into the room, kicking the door shut behind him. I dare you. Give me a reason to paint these walls with you. Moretti raised his gun, but Dominic didn't even flinch. He fired 2 controlled bursts. Moretti dropped to the floor, grasping his shattered knee, screaming in agony. Leo froze, his hands raised in surrender. Dom, listen to me, it's not what it looks like. Shut up, Dominic commanded. He didn't look at his cousin. His fierce grey eyes found Penelope, sweeping over her rapidly to ensure she was unharmed. The raw, unfiltered possessiveness in his gaze stole the breath from her lungs. Come here, Bat, Mia Regina. Penelope didn't hesitate. She walked past the trembling Leo and stepped to Dominic's side. He immediately wrapped his free arm around her thick waist, pulling her flush against his chest. He was trembling, not with fear, but with an adrenaline-fueled rage at the thought of her in danger. You brought a civilian into this, Dom, Leo sneered, trying to salvage his pride. You're going soft, letting a caterer fight your battles. She's not a civilian, Dominic said softly, pressing a kiss to Penelope's temple, his eyes locked on his treacherous cousin. She's my partner, and she just handed me your head on a silver platter. The fallout from the Waldorf Astoria was swift, bloody, and entirely contained within the shadows of the criminal underworld. Leo was taken to an undisclosed location in the Mojave Desert, and the Rossi syndicate underwent a brutal, terrifying purge of anyone loyal to the traitor. Through it all, Penelope found herself pulled deeper into Dominic's inner sanctum. Her apartment in Henderson was heavily guarded, but more often than not, she found herself staying at Dominic's sprawling penthouse atop the area resort. 2 weeks after the incident at the Waldorf, the dust had finally settled. The Moretti family, crippled by the loss of their leader and the sudden, aggressive expansion of the Rossi syndicate, had surrendered their territory. Penelope stood on the balcony of Dominic's penthouse, the desert wind whipping her dark curls around her face as she looked out over the glittering expanse of Las Vegas. She wore a silk robe, one of Dominic's, that draped elegantly over her full figure. She was exhausted, exhilarated, and terrified of how seamlessly she had adapted to a life of organized crime. The sliding glass door opened softly behind her. Dominic stepped out into the warm night air. He handed her a tumbler of amber liquid, a rare Macallan Scotch. It's done, Dominic said softly, leaning against the glass railing beside her. Leo's faction is completely dismantled. The docks are secure. The families are falling in line. Penelope took a slow sip of the Scotch, the burn grounding her. And what about the rat in the police department? The one Leo was paying off? Taken care of, Dominic assured her, his eyes never leaving her face. You found the financial discrepancies in Lux Catering's dummy accounts perfectly. We fed them the fake ledgers. The FBI arrested Captain Miller an hour ago. Penelope nodded, looking down at the swirling amber liquid. So, the job is finished. You got what you wanted. Dominic reached out, taking the glass from her hand and setting it on a nearby patio table. He stepped into her space, his large hands coming to rest on her waist. He didn't shy away from her curves. He held her with a firm, reverent grip, his thumbs tracing the soft line of her hips through the silk. "I got exactly what I needed to survive," Dominic corrected, his voice dropping to that intimate, gravelly register that always made her pulse race. "But I haven't gotten what I want." Penelope looked up into his slate-grey eyes. "And what does the boss of the West Coast want?" "You," he said simply. There was no hesitation, no games. "I want you, Penelope. I've spent my entire life surrounded by men who kiss the ring and scheme behind my back, and women who smile and tell me what they think I want to hear. And then you walked into my ballroom, slapped me across the face, and told me exactly who you were." A slow smile tugged at the corners of Penelope's mouth. "You deserved that slap." Dominic laughed, the deep, rumbling sound vibrating against her chest. "I did. But I don't want you just because you have a temper, Penelope. I want you because you have a brilliant mind. You outsmarted men who have been playing this game for decades. You didn't shrink yourself for them, and you never shrank yourself for me." He brought a hand up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "People look at you and they underestimate you. I look at you and I see a queen who is perfectly built to rule this city by my side." Penelope leaned into his touch, her heart swelling. She had spent a lifetime fighting to be seen, fighting to prove that her size, her voice, and her presence were valid. She had never imagined that the one person who would truly see her, who would worship the very ground she walked on, would be the most dangerous man in Nevada. "If I stay," Penelope murmured, her hands moving to grip the lapels of his dark shirt, "I don't stay as an employee. I don't stay as a mistress hidden in a penthouse. I run the logistics. I manage the legitimate businesses. We are partners, Dominic. 50-50. Dominic Rossi's legendary smirk spread across his face, his eyes blazing with absolute adoration and dark promise. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he whispered. He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that was as fierce and uncompromising as the man himself. It was a promise signed in blood and sealed in loyalty. The underworld of Las Vegas thought they had bowed to a king, but as Dominic pulled Penelope closer, cementing their empire, they were about to realize that the true power had just taken her throne. The undisputed queen of the Rossi syndicate had arrived, and she was going to make them all bend the knee. What an epic finale! Penelope proved that confidence, intelligence, and refusing to shrink yourself can bring even the most dangerous Mafia boss to his knees. Did you love this twist on the Mafia romance trope? If Penelope's fierce energy and Dominic's absolute obsession with her kept you hooked, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a badass heroine, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic romance stories every single week.